So my name is Jamiyla Lowe. I'm an artist, primarily an illustrator, and I live and work in Toronto. So I primarily work digitally. So for the illustration work that I do and the book works that I make, I work on an iPad. But sometimes I do analog work, so I'll do colored pencil, acrylic gouache, that sort of thing. And I also make some sculptural work, so for that part of my practice, I use polymer clay. And outside of that, I also do a bit of animation work, which is something that is a little bit more recent for me. Um, it's a really hard thing to answer because I've always just done it since I was really young. So I think I'm always motivated to kind of improve on what I can do, whether it's working with a different medium or getting better at, I don't know, drawing things in perspective, which I'm still not great at. So there are some technical things that I'm always trying to challenge myself with a little bit. But I guess the content of my work, I'm always trying to answer maybe some questions that are kind of floating around in my head, or with a bit of a sense of humor, kind of like really analyzing my own behavior in a way and trying to um, have a sense of humor about it or depict that in some way. Yeah, I guess I'm a little less focused on, not necessarily that I'm less focused on the content of my work. I mean, it all goes together, but I don't have like a super specific set of themes that I'm dealing with in my work. And I think a lot of that comes from, I guess, my experience as an illustrator as opposed to being more in the fine arts side of things, because I'm always, it's more like a problem solving exercise to be an illustrator, where someone throws kind of vague ideas at you and you have to be creative and interpret them in a way that is maybe appealing to what they're, fits what they're asking for. So I feel like, yeah, a lot of the time it's more like this problem solving skill that I'm trying to work with rather than having like an overall like vision or mandate for like what I'm trying to express with my work overall. So I think that when it's really more like project to project. So when I do work independently on my own books or um, on my own kind of narratives, they're usually broken up into like this book is about this thing, like this project is about this thing, and I'm sure there is a through line, but they're all kind of, it's pretty varied as far as subject matter. So I was thinking about this question in terms of the work that I'm showing in the show specifically. So most of the work is uh, from a book that I put out in 2020 called As You Wish. So it's a book about wishing, and I guess you can kind of fit it into like the power of the things that we want or the things that we um, think we want. So each image in the book is about a different want or a different need, and it usually depicts like a person observing the thing they want, whether it's a photograph, or they're watching TV, or they're with their family members or something like that. But each image in the book is about something that we might think we want, and it kind of asks the question of maybe why we want these things, and it kind of shows what happens when we do get these things, and how we feel about them once we've received them. So it's supposed to be kind of a funny book, because it's just like this cycle of wants and needs, and so I guess that's how you can kind of fit it into the idea of power. So yeah. So two of the images from the show are taken from the book As You Wish, and I thought it was a good opportunity to get the images printed in oversized textile, to kind of recreate it as almost an environment, because I do depict a lot of interior spaces or domestic spaces in my work. I thought this show would be a good opportunity to experiment with that, because so much of my work is done digitally on a smaller scale or in book form. So I wanted it to feel somewhat like you're experiencing it as an environment, rather than just in a smaller format. So I chose these two images because they kind of mirror each other a little bit. So the TV room one shows a young person, sitting on the carpet, watching a TV show of two people that don't look very much like them, being intimate, kissing. So it's just like this idea of love. So it's kind of depicts like an abstract want, especially for someone that's like young. I don't know. And then the kind of mirror image to that is the living room, where it's an empty living room, and there's a portrait of a family, and there's a figure that's standing by the window, just kind of waiting, with a glass in their hand, and it's kind of starting to crack. And we're making eye contact with this small animal that's kind of there for us to relate to. So I kind of use this kind of a trope of like, it's kind of like a light melodrama, almost like you'd see in a soap opera or something. And the cracks starting to show in this like idealized kind of life. And it mirrors the TV room image of like the young person sitting on the floor watching this soap opera. So I think they kind of relate to each other, and I think those are the two interior spaces that I think I drew the best. So that's why I chose those two. So this is my book, As You Wish, from 2020. It came out during the pandemic, but funny enough, I drew all the images before the pandemic, because a lot of them take place indoors and kind of isolated. So the front of the book is two characters kind of wishing on a star, and I kind of have the back page of the book mirror. It's another mirror mirroring image of the same two characters. They're a little bit older now, and the star is a little bit exhausted. So I kind of just think to myself a lot. Like I wish for a lot of things. I wish this would happen. I wish that would happen. I wish, and I just never. It never ceases. You know, it never ends. So I got kind of exhausted with the idea of like it's kind of like I'm begging. This idea of like I'm constantly begging for things. So. This is the beginning of the book. It's a little bit dark and mysterious. I guess you can look at these three characters as like three fates, and they have all these kind of little objects around them that are kind of typically used in casting spells, wishing, that sort of thing. So here's the beginning of the book with the young person watching the soap opera in the living room. And the next page is kind of like more of a teenage bedroom. You know, talking on the phone, you start having your teenage problems, but this little character under the bed is kind of like maybe a younger sibling or something like that, kind of wishing they were older. They're like a little bit isolated. They're kind of like wanting to start participating in being more grown up. This is a kind of a typical kind of new agey teen bedroom. So I'm kind of like poking fun at a lot of these kind of dated aesthetics, and maybe like an argument on the phone with maybe parents, older siblings, you know, kind of having an argument over what you can and can't do. So this is the fitness one. So I made a little animation of the actual aerobics video. So I do take little parts of the images and isolate them to kind of pull a little bit more focus. So that's part of why I like working across different mediums sometimes. So it's kind of an exaggerated, obviously exaggerated figure of like the musculature of this person is obviously very unrealistic, but I did that to emphasize, I don't know, just like the absurdity of like wanting to, you know, look like this. You know, I think I used to think this was like some sort of an ideal, not this specifically, but it's just kind of making fun of that ideal. And then this image here is kind of like supposed to be this kind of vacation setting, but it's in the middle of a sea of lava. And then here is the kind of adult version of, they're not all the same character necessarily, but this is kind of like the adult version of, you know, you maybe have a nice home and a nice family, but then this cracking glass kind of represents maybe the cracks that are starting to show in this kind of idealized life that you maybe wanted for yourself. This one is an exhausted person with two fighting children. I also recreated this image in colored pencil as a kind of, it's like colored pencil and ink, but I kind of just cropped out the kids and really focused on the character on the couch. And it's funny because a friend of mine looked at it the other day and she was like, oh, I love the expression on their face. It's kind of like you can't tell if they're upset or just exhausted or just kind of zoning out. Like it's just like a very relatable, uh, it's a relatable expression, but it's not, it's so kind of undefined in a way. So I kind of liked that. And then this last couple of pages, so I was doing a couple of things here. So you have these two kind of twin beds next to each other. It could be two siblings. It could be, you know, an older couple. I kind of stole these two pictures over the beds from I Love Lucy, the set of their bedroom. Like they always slept in separate beds on the show, and these are the two images they have over their beds in that show. So that was just a reference to that. But yeah, so it could either be two siblings or a couple in the end. And this is kind of like a idealized version of heaven where the characters from the first page kind of reappear. So they're there to greet you, and one of them is spitting on the people down below. And then that's it. So it's kind of like just yeah, so I've made at least 3, maybe 4 of these kinds of picture books. So yeah, I was thinking that being able to present this work in this context I've never gotten to do before. So it makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm also really excited because I think it has potential to be experienced in a more kind of tactile, environmental way instead of just maybe in a book. So we'll see how that goes. Each narrative isn't necessarily isolated. So when I kind of started working in this way, a little bit more independently, making my book works, like I used a lot of these similar characters, and they were in more of a prehistoric context. So that would have been in one of the first books that I made, but I kind of decided to just place them in a more modern context. So I kind of jumped back and forth between the two to see how they experience things in the two different kind of realms, I guess, because they look pretty similar. They're never wearing clothes in this new, like in their modern context, as well as their like past context, if that makes sense. But they have they show a lot of the same behaviors, I guess. So they are connected, but they have different narratives. So when I started doing the sculpture project, where I started making these polymer clay sculptures and kind of building sets around them, putting them into their own environments, I think that narrative was more connected to like this kind of prehistoric past of these kind of characters. So, so yeah, they're all connected in a way, but they just take place in different, I guess, time periods in my brain.